The Discovery of the Americas by Betsy and Giulio Maestro. Many thousands of years ago, the world was a very different place. During the last ice age, a natural bridge formed between the landmass we call Asia and what is now North America. All over Asia, small groups of wandering people, or nomads, moved from place to place in search of food. They hunted large animals, including huge mastodons and mammoths, using weapons made of stone. They ate what food they could find, and when it was gone, they moved on. Following the large game animals, these Stone Age hunters crossed over from Asia into what would later be called the New World. No one knows exactly when the first people arrived in the Americas, but it was probably at least 20,000 years ago. This movement, or migration, of people continued very slowly over thousands of years. New groups moved across from Asia, and earlier arrivals moved farther into the new land. Gradually, people spread throughout what are now Canada, the United States, Mexico, Central, and South America. During this time, Earth's climate was changing. Temperatures slowly grew warmer, and the ice that covered much of the globe began to melt. The oceans rose, and around 12,000 years ago the land link between Asia and North America was covered by water. No more people would come to the New World on foot. The way people lived also began to change. The large game animals gradually died out, possibly because of the warmer temperatures or because hunters killed too many. With the large game mostly gone, the hunting nomads had to search for new kinds of food. As people in the New World began to fish, gather fruits and nuts, and hunt smaller game, they stopped moving from place to place. They built simple homes, and small settlements grew up. After a while they began to plant and harvest their own food. Corn was one of the first crops raised by these early farmers. Each group had its own way of life, depending on its land and climate. Some groups did continue to move around for part of the year, following the herds of buffalo. Over a period of time, a number of great civilizations grew up in the Americas. These cultures built cities, devised written languages, and had their own religious beliefs and customs. The Maya people, for instance, constructed about 60 cities in the area that is now Mexico and Central America. Their great temples and pyramids show that they were master builders. They were skillful in mathematics and astronomy and created a calendar that was highly accurate. Accomplished Maya artists produced pottery, sculpture, and jewelry. During this time, there was no way for new settlers or explorers to come to the Americas over land. However, it is possible that some early voyages were made by sea. As long ago as 5,000 years, Japanese fishermen may have accidentally reached South America, perhaps after getting lost in a storm on the Pacific Ocean. The seafaring Phoenicians did have ships capable of long ocean voyages, and may have crossed the Atlantic to trade with people in the Americas more than 2,000 years ago. It is possible that later Chinese sailors reached the west coast of the Americas. No one knows for sure whether any of these voyages really happened, but pottery and other objects that have been found in the Americas show amazing similarity to some found in the Old World. The answer to this puzzle is still a mystery. St. Brendan, an Irish monk, is said to have made a voyage of discovery across the Atlantic in a small wood and leather boat during the 6th century, more than 1,400 years ago. Whether this journey was real or imagined is not known, but the fascinating written story of his voyage was read all over Europe and may have encouraged later explorers to seek the magical lands it described. The first proven sea voyage to the Americas was made by the Vikings of Norway. Bjarni Herjolfsson first sighted North America in the 10th century, and Leif Erikson actually landed there in the year 1000. Leif Erikson's father, Eric the Red, sailed from Norway to Iceland and then to Greenland, where he started a colony. Leif sailed from Greenland to what is now Newfoundland, an island off the coast of Canada. The Vikings called this new land Vinland, and small groups of them tried a number of times to found a permanent colony there. However, their contacts with the native people were sometimes violent, and their life was harsh and isolated. The Vikings finally gave up and left Vinland forever. The larger Viking colony in Greenland lasted for almost 500 years before dying out. There are many stories of Prince Madoc of Wales sailing to North America in the 12th century, but no real traces of his visit have been found. Most people do not believe the stories of his journey to be true. All over North and South America, the descendants of the first Americans continue to live and change. Although the Maya thrived in Mexico and Central America for thousands of years, most Native American cultures were short-lived. The Hopewell people, builders of mound cities in many places in North America, existed for more than 600 years. The great Inca Empire, however, lasted for less than 100. The descendants of many of these groups still live in areas of the Americas today. Archaeologists are still searching for and finding clues to these ancient peoples' lives buried in the earth. For nearly 500 years following Leif Erikson's voyages, no new explorers seem to have come to the Americas. Few people in Europe knew about the Viking discoveries in North America. There was poor communication between distant places, and knowledge of the rest of the world was limited. During this time, Europeans had little interest in such perilous sea voyages to faraway lands. They were too busy at home fighting wars among themselves, battling disease, and journeying to the Middle East on religious crusades. Toward the end of this period, Marco Polo and other adventurers and traders began to travel to the Far East, bringing back silk, spices, and other exotic goods, very welcome in Europe. The overland trade routes to China and India were long and hard to travel. About 100 years after these routes opened, they were closed to Europeans as a result of unrest in many areas. So, Europe was forced to look for a sea route to the Far East. This search began an exciting period in European history. It was a time of learning, growth, and discovery. Early in the 15th century, Portuguese explorers began making many voyages to the islands in the Atlantic and along the African coast. In 1488, Bartolomeu Diaz settled down the west coast of Africa and rounded the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip. A sea route to India now seemed possible, and some years later, Vasco da Gama would reach India by continuing from where Diaz